I'm always try to find the reason to be hungry. I always try to remember back in the days, like when I was young, I just play football to enjoy it and love it. But
How does a boy, born in a small Egyptian village with no stadium, no academy, no pathway, become the man who conquered Europe? This isn't just football. This is survival. This is obsession. This is Mohamed Salah's beginning. Picture this: Nagrig, a dusty village in the Nile Delta. Population barely 10,000. No spotlight, no scouts, no television crews. Just kids chasing a ball on uneven dirt fields, using plastic bags tied together when they couldn't afford a real ball. That was Salah's reality. Every morning, he'd wake up before the sun, help his family with chores, then dash off with a ball. He wasn't taller than most, not stronger, but there was something else, a stubbornness, an obsession. While his friends played for fun, Salah was rehearsing destiny. But here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. To chase his dream, Salah traveled from Nagrig to Cairo, 5 hours each way. Every single day. At just 14 years old, he'd leave school early, crammed into buses, switching from one to another, barely eating, just to reach El Mokaloon's training ground. And after training, another 5 hours back. By the time he got home, it was midnight. Then wake up, repeat. Ask yourself, how many 14-year-olds would sacrifice their teenage years like that? While others were out playing video games, Salah was on the road, fighting sleep, fighting hunger, fighting doubt. At El Mokaloon, he stood out immediately. Not because he was polished, he wasn't. Not because he was strong, he wasn't. But because of his speed. Even then, defenders couldn't touch him. Coaches remember saying, "This boy runs like the wind. If he learns control, he will be unstoppable." But here's the human side. Salah wasn't just chasing his dream. He was carrying a whole village with him. Nagrig had never produced a professional footballer, let alone a superstar. Families there struggled, young boys gave up early. For them, Salah was a symbol, even before he'd achieved anything. And then came the break. At 18, he made his debut in the Egyptian Premier League. Scrawny, nervous, almost invisible. He wasn't scoring. Critics whispered, "Too weak, too small, he won't last." But Salah had something they didn't: resilience. In 2012, everything changed. Basel, a Swiss club, saw him in a youth tournament. But fate nearly destroyed it before it began. His visa was delayed. He missed his flight. He thought the dream was over. But days later, Basel called again. Salah boarded the next plane, barely speaking English, carrying just determination. And in his trial game, he didn't even start. He came on at halftime, and within 45 minutes, he ripped apart the opposition with his blistering pace, scoring twice. Basel had seen enough. They signed him. Think about it. From Nagrig's dirt fields to Switzerland's green pitches in just a few years. A boy who spent half his childhood in buses was now on Europe's stage. But deep down, Salah knew this wasn't the destination. This was only the beginning. He wasn't there to play in Switzerland. He was there to announce himself to the world. When Salah arrived in Switzerland with Basel, it felt like he'd entered another universe. Snow on the ground, fans speaking languages he didn't understand, foods he had never tasted. For a boy from Nagrig, it was overwhelming. But football was universal. At Basel, he exploded onto the scene. Lightning pace, sharp dribbling, relentless runs. Suddenly, European giants started watching. His biggest coming out moment? Against Chelsea in the Europa League. He scored, not once, twice. He tormented their defense. And in that moment, fate was writing his next chapter. Because months later, Chelsea came calling. Mourinho wanted him. Stamford Bridge awaited. It looked like the dream. A boy from Nagrig wearing the blue of one of England's giants. Cameras followed him. Headlines called him Egypt's jewel. But here's where reality crushed him. At Chelsea, Salah didn't play. He sat on the bench. He trained. He waited. Weeks turned into months. Mourinho didn't trust him. Too raw, too lightweight, too inconsistent. For many players, that's the end. One failed move, one big rejection, and your career spirals down. But Salah? He carried the scars of rejection before. Remember Atletico Madrid told Rodri he was too skinny? Salah's scars were similar. He had been told no his whole life. So instead of quitting, Salah left. Fiorentina took him on loan. And in Florence, something unlocked. The purple shirt gave him freedom. He tore through Serie A defenses, scoring in big games against Juventus and Inter. Suddenly, everyone realized this was not the same boy Chelsea had left on the bench. This was a man on fire. Then came Roma. And here, Salah became unstoppable. Every week, goals, assists, electric runs. He wasn't just a winger anymore. He was Egypt's pride. He was becoming a symbol for an entire nation. And here's where the story connects to something bigger than club football, the Africa Cup of Nations. Egypt, a football-mad country, had been starved of success. Their glory days of the mid-2000s had faded. The nation needed a hero, and Salah became that hero. In the 2017 AFCON, he carried Egypt to the final. Every goal, every dribble, every sprint felt like the hopes of 100 million people were running with him. In the final, he gave everything, but they fell to Cameroon. The heartbreak was raw. Egyptians cried. Salah cried. But instead of breaking, it forged him. And then came the 2018 World Cup qualifiers. Egypt hadn't qualified for the World Cup in 28 years. In a do-or-die match against Congo, Salah stepped up. 95th minute. Pressure at its peak. The stadium in Cairo was silent. The whole nation was silent. Salah placed the ball on the spot. One penalty, one kick, one country waiting. He buried it. The stadium erupted. Egypt was going to the World Cup. Grown men cried. Children danced. Families prayed. And in the middle of it all, Salah wept. That wasn't just football. That was history. That was destiny. But destiny isn't always kind. At the 2018 Champions League final with Liverpool versus Real Madrid, Salah's career hit its darkest night. A rough tackle by Sergio Ramos dislocated his shoulder. Salah left the field in tears, not only because he was missing the biggest club game of his life, but because in 2 weeks, Egypt had their first World Cup in 28 years. Egypt without Salah? Unthinkable. He rushed his recovery, fought through pain, and played, scoring twice at the World Cup, despite being half fit. Egypt lost, but the world saw the sacrifice. Salah wasn't just a footballer anymore. He was a warrior, carrying his people even when broken. At this point, Salah wasn't just a player. He was the Pharaoh, a symbol of resilience, of Egypt's fight, of a boy from Nagrig who had dragged his country back onto the world stage. And just when the world thought his peak was near, he was about to explode even further. When Mohamed Salah signed for Liverpool in 2017, it didn't shake the football world. Some headlines called it a gamble. Chelsea had already failed him. Roma was good, but Liverpool? That was supposed to be too big a stage. The critics whispered, he's just another fast winger. He won't last. But Jurgen Klopp saw something else. He didn't just see pace. He saw obsession. He saw hunger. He saw a man who had been scarred by rejection and was ready to burn the world to prove himself. And burn the world, Salah did. His very first season was a storm. 44 goals in all competitions. A record-breaking 32 goals in a 38-game Premier League season. Defenders couldn't breathe around him. His trademark move, cutting in from the right, onto his left foot, curling it, became inevitable and yet unstoppable. Anfield had seen legends, but the cop had never sung a new player's name with such passion, such speed. Mo Salah, running down the wing, became an anthem not just in Liverpool, but in Egypt, in Africa, in every corner of the world where dreamers lived. But football, like life, always tests you. 2018, Champions League Final. Kiev, Liverpool versus Real Madrid. Salah was the star, the hope, the face of belief. And then, Sergio Ramos. A tangle, a fall, a shoulder ripped apart. Salah rolled on the grass, tears streaming, carried off before halftime. For Liverpool fans, heartbreak. For Egypt, devastation. For Salah himself, agony. Egypt had waited 28 years for this, and their hero was broken. But Salah fought, rushed his recovery, taped his shoulder, injected painkillers. And when he scored in Russia, even though Egypt lost, the world saw something deeper. This wasn't just a footballer. This was a man carrying 100 million souls on his shoulders. But destiny wasn't done with him. 2019 Madrid. Another Champions League final. Another chance. Liverpool versus Tottenham. 2 minutes in, a penalty. Salah steps up. millions watching. The same man who cried in Kiev now stood tall in Madrid. He smashed it in. Redemption. 90 minutes later, Salah lifted the Champions League trophy. From tears to triumph. From heartbreak to history. And then, the drought breaker. Liverpool hadn't won the Premier League in 30 years. 30 years of waiting. 30 years of pain. 30 years of rivals mocking them. But Salah's goals, his relentlessness, his refusal to stop, dragged them over the line in 2020. Behind closed doors, in a pandemic,
like feel first grateful to be here around the fans here, and kids come from Egypt and done it in that level and play in Anfield and become a star in Anfield. It's something so special, so special.
World stood still, but Liverpool roared again. And Salah wasn't just a star. He was the symbol of a new era. Klopp said, "Without Mo, none of this is possible." But while he conquered Europe with Liverpool, he still had another battlefield. AFCON. 2021, Cameroon. Egypt versus Senegal. The final. It wasn't just a game. It was Mo Salah versus Sadio Mane. Teammates at Liverpool. Brothers in arms. Now enemies for a night. The world watched as Africa's two giants carried their nations. The final went to penalties. Salah stood waiting, Egypt's fifth taker. But he never got the chance. Mane scored the winner. Senegal were champions. Liverpool, he roared again. Golden Boots. Playmaker Awards. PFA Player of the Year. Champions League semi-finals. Domestic cups. His name echoing across Anfield like a hymn. He wasn't just a footballer anymore. He was an ambassador for Africa. A face of humility in a sport drowning in ego. A boy who built hospitals and schools in his village. Who donated millions back home. Who never forgot where he came from. And yet, every time he pulls on the Egypt shirt, you see the weight he carries. The hunger in his eyes. The obsession. He's conquered Europe, but there's one crown he still craves. AFCON glory for Egypt. Because for Mo Salah, the journey isn't just about goals or trophies. It's about legacy. It's about the boy from Nagrig who dared to dream. Fell, rose, fell again, and kept rising until the world had no choice but to bow.